When you were describing that, it just reminded me of these sequences, these, and just for people that aren't into this, like as much as you are, that there are these like sequences that help trigger behaviors, and you've got different kind of points that you're tying into for these pre-existing sequences and different ways to connect behavior to existing behaviors. I love that approach. As you know, this is not the easiest thing in the world to market, right? You're trying to introduce something that needs regulated. It's very complicated in terms of who may be purchasing it. I'm curious, where are you along the journey to get this all the way to market and get it in more households and facilities? Tony, welcome to the Growth Stories podcast. So happy to have you on the show. I'd love to just to start off with, can you tell us a little bit about like what is the problem in the market that you saw and how are you going about addressing it?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I come from the research area. We spent time developing interventions for people with dementia in this particular case. And what I saw was that people were losing their independence because they were not able to manage their medications correctly. They weren't taking them consistently. That led to a crisis. So that's what inspired me to sort of solve the problem of medication adherence as a focus. Now, since that time, we've moved, I've never really worked with people with dementia yet on our time horizon, but we began with people in the community taking their medications. We pivoted to sort of heart failure and stroke, pivoted again to oral oncolytics or the cancer medications that are taken orally, and we ended up where we think we could do most good, our beachhead market as we consider it today, which is chronic mental health diagnoses, so serious mental health diagnoses.
And this is to help people remember to take the correct medication.
Well, I think of what we do is train them to take their medications on time, and it becomes sort of self-internalized over time. So, and that was really our insight. Our insight was to essentially in my research, saw that people were taking medications a little early. So when they have that 7-day pill box and their digital watch, it was always going on after the fact. You'd already taken it. So you were sort of always training yourself to ignore the alarm.
Oh, I see. So you're like, so just for context to make sure that I'm tracking. So you're saying that when you were doing research, you found the actual behavior sequence in these patients, in these individuals, didn't match the ideal, that they had already taken their medicine, and that helps them start just learning to totally ignore the notifications because it's coming when it's not useful.
Yeah. I don't know about totally ignore, but it weakens it. So that, so we came up with this idea we now call situational smart alerting, which is that we create a window around the time of taking. And if you take it in the first half, then when you take it, our device knows that you've taken it and there's no alert. It just checks the box, creates the record, and you're done. So the behavior importantly creates the record, right? So that's one component. And then the other is that in taking the medication, if you're forgetting to take the medication, which happens, occasionally, you're distracted or something, then it reminds you to take it. Only when you miss the medication do you get on what we call our daily intelligent action list. And this is another differentiator for us, is that we're connected to the care team. And so the care team is then alerted that you're not taking the medications. And so that's a lot of steps. But essentially, you take the medication, you're fine. You forget to get the medication, you get a reminder. And if you skip the medication, you can initiate a discussion with the care team.
Yeah. I love how that works. And for some reason, this is reminding me of other behaviorists. So I'm just thinking of, I'm sure, have you heard of this fellow, BJ Fogg from Stanford?
I've met him, actually. I was in the Netherlands at the very first Persuasive Technology Conference that was held there. And he was the guest of that conference. And I've enjoyed meeting him, I think, 2 or 3 occasions over time.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, when you were describing that, it just reminded me of these sequences, these, and just for people that aren't into this, like as much as you are, that there are these like sequences that help trigger behaviors, and you've got different kind of points that you're tying into for these pre-existing sequences and different ways to connect behavior to existing behaviors.
So there's also some negative things that happen, right? So in addition to detraining, as the formal word for alerts, I think it also, what the engineers have created these, Keurig-like devices on the counter that I call it the temple of pills, and that the temple of pills
Yeah.
is calling you over, remind you that you're sick and to take your medication, right? Our methodology is aimed at empowering use. The key is
Mhm.
you get an alert that something you have to do with your medications. It might be education. It might be to take a survey. It might be to check in. It might be to take your medications, but you get an alert the same way you get it, never from the device, always on your smart environment, from your smart environment, your speaker, your watch, your phone. And you always make the positive decision to go and take the medication. So
Yeah.
other behaviorist Bandura says that's in this decision point cycle that you do, you're going to the same place every day, making the positive decision. It reinforces that. And it's actually a form of soft operant conditioning. And so
Yeah.
myself, when I took a daily medication for my psoriasis that I'm a chronic sufferer of, I would have to go, I would find myself in the kitchen, at 6 o'clock and wonder, I'd already eaten dinner. Why am I back in the kitchen? And all of a sudden the light on the pod would come on and I would go, oh, I'm a trained cat here to get my dinner,
Yeah.
essentially. So
Yeah.
I know that it becomes very innate, that behavior. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it both reinforces positive things and it avoids the negative things that make you not want to take your medication.
Yeah. I love that approach. And, as you know, this is not the easiest thing in the world to market, right? You're trying to introduce something that is regulated. It's very complicated in terms of who may be purchasing it. I'm curious, where are you along the journey to get this all the way to market and get it in more households and facilities?
So we've taken a lot of that journey. We demonstrated the behavioral components for the most part in the laboratory. There's one more component, which is our ability to see if the medications are working. So with our partner Vadera Health, we've developed a set of visual AI assessments that allow for you to just answer a few questions about your day and essentially determine level of anxiety, depression, or whether you have side effects. One in particular for the antipsychotic medications that we're focused on for people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. You take these critical daily medications called antipsychotics. They have a side effect called tardive dyskinesia, which is an abnormal movement disorder, involuntary movement disorder that
Yeah.
occurs.
So it's detectable.
Yes, you want to see that earlier than is typically understood to be seen, and alert
Hmm.
again the care team. So that's another component. So this big story is difficult because most people just think, well, there's a pill box and a digital watch, and so that problem is long solved. But in fact,
Yeah.
about 25% of people in behavioral health treatment disengage from treatment primarily due to not taking their medications and the subsequent erratic behavior that might result.
Yeah, and to be fair, you are not just doing a pill box and a smartwatch because there are apps today you could buy that might, try and help you remember, and there's tools and things, but you're trying to make a clinically validated system to really make sure the entire process is working like end to end, which is obviously that's way bigger outcome than you've got
Yeah.
these alerts queued.
So you touched on the regulatory component. So we're in pursuit of a Class 2 designation, which is our full system, our app, our device, our IoT pill dispenser, and the cloud that we utilize with these AI components as well. So all of that is our full device. So it's kind of a combination of software as a medical device and hardware. And that is actually somewhat unique. It
Yeah.
certainly was 10 years ago when we started, but we've passed through the early stages of our FDA conversations. We've had a 513G, it's called, discussion, and we have our labeling and our predicate identified. And now we're up against contract manufacturing. So that's the next step for us. In order to do some of the testing, we needed the contracts. We established some of the early work, and now we're ready to produce a number of certified devices and put them in the field. And that's where we are.
Mhm.
So we needed
So you're
to,
doing like the
uh,
short run with contract manufacturers, and then you have to use those devices, certify them, and then run another test.
Yeah, well, we don't have to run that test.
Oh,
The
okay.
certification, the Class 2 designation comes from the device being built in a quality manner, is what I would say. And but it doesn't require any additional validation the way an internal device would, a Class 3 device.
I see. Okay. Very interesting. And so what is what's your timeline for when you're going to take it all the way to market?
5 years ago, it
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, we have currently, we won the American Medical Informatics national contest through an organization we belong to called MedStarter in 2019, actually, a long time ago now. That we won that in December of 2019. We're talking to investors in early 2020, and then COVID sort of locked down. And then, 2 years later, we're back out in the field. Telemedicine's suddenly a thing people are believing in and actually executing, but there's still, still ignoring this medication adherence problem. And there've been a number of solutions, but they're all engineering solutions, reinforcing the wrong things, and there's still no household name for this device, for a device that's doing this, and almost,
Yeah, the opportunity is still
uh-huh.
enormous. Yeah.
So
And when you're
we're
using
still
AI
there.
in a medical context, are you using like local LLMs? Are you able to use are there restrictions there?
We don't put the video on the locally. We move it to a HIPAA compliant high-tech DAC server
Yeah.
environment through Azure, and that's how we move our data around. We're kind of in that gray space where there's no specific PHI. We're
Mhm.
just looking at the pixels and seeing what's happening. But we do have we do have a contract with our behavioral health clinics to move data and to pull data into a lake that we
Mhm.
utilize to move their schedule around and to report on their schedule. But the
Yeah.
nice thing about it is that there's it's a we have we're not like X-rays or streaming. We're like, 4K daily files.
Yeah.
We're a tiny footprint on everything. But we're the most important information because whether you're taking your meds or not really determines, and if they're being effective or not is just absolutely key to knowing what to do
Yeah.
next.
Yeah. It just reminds me, so my grandpa was a doctor, and whenever he had to do anything medical, he didn't always do half. He'd never remember. He would always joke around like, "Oh, I'm doing a study. What happens when you only remember to take your meds like every other day?" He would say that all the time. And I'm sure that's common for most people that the actual adherence is quite low. Well, this
So,
is fascinating.
yeah, for dementia, it's actually the opposite. I just think this is an interesting case where
Yeah.
when you take, often people are, they don't want to be in trouble or they're attracted to that extra missed dose. So they want to always get ahead because their time sense goes after stroke with cognitive
Yeah.
impairment, and they tend to take too much medicine. And that's actually
Oh,
more.
yeah. That could be more damaging. Yeah. That's very interesting. Well, this is fascinating. And it's not every day that I get to talk to somebody building a hardcore medical, like changing behavior device. So I've really appreciated the conversation. And if there's anyone else out there that is really trying to solve a large problem, it's not an app that they're trying to solve a large problem in a regulated area. After everything you've been through, what would your number one piece of advice for that kind of founder be?
First, think carefully before you take on a problem that involves hardware. Absolutely. But surround yourself with a great team. That's Dr. Fred Ma, who's I've been working with for almost 20 years, is a regulatory expert and a neurologist and a brain surgeon by training and has 25 years of FDA regulatory experience under his belt. He's been an amazing mentor. Dr. Owen Muir, the psychiatrist that we work with, is an influencer and an inspiration in his energy. Larry Tusick, I've worked with for almost 20 years as well on healthcare sales in my prior company and in this one. And then William Yuan, who joined just a great CEO with a great history and IPO experience and all that. And that they have joined I've gotten them to believe in this idea and
Yeah.
that joined us, and that having a team that you can count on to do these hard things is what you need to be successful. It's too hard to lift. And then maybe the other thing I'd say is you really need to work with all the other healthcare companies, because you can't silo. It's all about, the word in the textbooks is co-opetition, right? So even your enemies are your friends, so to speak. Your closest competition, you need to be friends with, because you need to work together to beat the market.
We all get there together. Yeah. Well, I love it. Thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you.
Really great.